Hello, everybody. Griffin Mcelroy was included in Forbes 30 Under 30 list as a media luminary and is one of the founders of a series of very successful podcasts, most notably the chart-topping My Brother, and Me, and The Adventure Zone. He is also a founding member of video game website Polygon of Vox Media, releasing video content including the notable Monster Factory. The aforementioned podcast, My Brother, and Me, was developed into a television series for NBC's comedy streaming app, CISO, and was the #1 television show on iTunes when it was released. These media ventures have only continued to grow and expand, with the graphic novel adaptation of the Adventure Zone podcast becoming a New York Times bestseller as of July 2018. This adaptation reached the highest placement for a graphic novel on the Times fiction list to date, opening the door for him, his brothers, and father to write a miniseries for the Marvel Comics universe. So, without further ado, please welcome Griffin Mcelroy.
Thank you. This is very strange. I was backstage in the green room, and I was like, this just feels weird, and I don't know why. And then I realized that it was the first time I've maybe been alone in the green room, and then it dawned on me I would be alone on stage, and that's where I'm at right now. Seriously, thank you all so much. Thank you. Thank you for that, and thank you for coming out to see me. I hope you all appreciate the fact that I never thought I would be doing anything like this, because I never thought I would be invited to do anything like this. So I genuinely want to thank FSU and everybody involved with organizing the Golden Tribe series. This really means a lot. All of that was my way of couching this by saying I've never done anything like this before, so just to set the expectations. So if you don't know who I am, you've picked a really weird way to spend your Tuesday night, and I'm assuming that you're a student here, because if you spent $35 to watch some internet rando talk about his business, okay. All right, I have nothing for you. If you are that person, I guess to the 6 of you, I'm what the internet calls a content creator, which is a term that someone came up with that describes someone who makes a bunch of different kinds of things, because just doing one kind of thing doesn't pay the bills. Gray listed my bona fides, which I appreciate, because now I don't have to do that myself. I'm genuinely usually pretty uncomfortable talking about my bona fides, but it's important when you hear about the stuff that I do and that I've done, that you remember that I'm a clown man. I'm a child boy with very few marketable skills, and if I've found success in my career, it is because I have been able to wring every drop of juice out of that very limited skill set as I possibly can, and hopefully that's one of the things I can talk about today. I also plan on discussing the benefits and pitfalls of tying your career to your family permanently, irrevocably, and how to do all the things listed above without suffering tremendous mental injury. Just kidding, that's not possible, but at least I can serve as a cautionary tale, if anything else. And I want to also catch all this and say, like, I don't know how practical the things I can share today are going to be, because the sort of patchwork components of my career make up a career that is unlike anybody else's that I know about, which is a weird flex now that I'm saying it out loud. Also, a lot of the success that I found happened in the sort of rough and tumble internet of 2007, which I wrote that originally as a joke, and then I realized it was 12 fucking years ago, and I went into a panic spiral. Yeah, I'm gonna get started. We're gonna do a Q&A at the end if y'all have any questions. I should also mention, like, I'm gonna touch on some personal stuff in this speech, because my personal life and my career life are essentially the same. I do podcasts exclusively with my family. I host a podcast with my wife. There are events from my childhood that inform my professional development today, which my therapist has a lot of fun with. So I was born and raised in a town called Huntington, West Virginia. It, too, was a college town. Go heard. There were about 50,000 people there when school was in session, and Marshall is actually where I matriculated and where I learned cool words like matriculated. And overall, like Huntington was a great place to grow up. Our house was 2 blocks away from the big city park, Ritter Park, which we never visited because we were too busy playing Super Nintendo in our rooms, but still it was nice to have, the option available. My dad, who you may know from his work on The Adventure Zone, was a radio DJ for a handful of radio stations around town. His tenure was mostly at 103.3 radio, country radio TCR, which may come as a surprise if you have listened to our shows before, because we never talk about country music, and the reason is that none of us like it very much, including my dad, which I think is a testament to his willpower, because he worked there for like 30 years. And my mom was the secretary for the church we all grew up in. We all grew up in the Southern Baptist Church, which is a whole nother kettle of fish. And my 2 brothers, Travis is 3 years older than I am, and Justin is 3 years older than him. Weirdly, they share the same birthday, 3 years apart, which was a real challenge for me because it wasn't my birthday, and that doesn't seem fair. And yeah, I had a great childhood, generally speaking, because our family we loved each other very, very much. Even if growing up in that house was kind of like being in an 18-year-long season of Last Comic Standing from time to time. Usually whenever I talk about sort of the origins of our family dynamic, I hearken back to just the dinner table. All of us sitting around the dinner table. We had dinner together every night, usually a home-cooked meal, very Norman Rockwell-esque. And the whole time we were just trying so hard to make each other laugh, which makes us maybe sound like a pretty insubstantial family, which is not the truth. We definitely use humor to deflect from tension, and that has turned out to be a very profitable skill. But we were also able to, sometimes get serious and hash stuff out when we needed to. One of the earliest lessons my dad taught me when I was like 5 ended up being actually one of the most useful things anybody's ever taught me, which was the phrase, read the room. I was 5, so like, it's a shame he had to say that to a 5-year-old. And our dad introduced us to just like so much comedy growing up. He had this VHS collection that was thousands of tapes large where he would just record stuff off TV. And he had his own, like, this is not a joke, he had his own like Dewey Decimal System. He had like a card catalog of literally thousands of tapes with like episodes of Kids in the Hall was a big one, and Saturday Night Live, and Marx Brothers, and episodes of Second City, and Laurel and Hardy. Just real great elementary school fare. And there was like Mystery Science Theater 3000. And then, like, if we didn't want to watch something funny, there was like a ton of Star Trek Deep Space Nine on there as well, if you wanted to break the pattern. And sort of reinforcing that comedy background, that kind of like interest in entertainment, our parents enrolled us in the local community theater scene, which was weirdly thriving in an Appalachian, relatively small town the size of Huntington. It was thriving in large part due to the involvement of parents like ours. And Justin and Travis were very drawn to the bright lights of the Great White Way, which is why they majored in theater in college. And then I, being the youngest, had the benefit of watching them not do anything with those degrees and choosing my own path. So we were all doing theater together. Our parents actually more or less invented the theater program at the church that we all grew up in. And I want to give you a moment to just like picture the mental image of the upstart theater program budding in the heart of an Appalachian Southern Baptist church. Like, it sounds like the plot of a great new like Bravo reality show, if I've ever heard one. They would do like our Easter pageants. My dad would write these Christmas dinner dramas. I got to play Jesus for a play that we took on the road for a couple mission trips, which is a real feather in my cap. And we did all this together, right? Like, we had dinner every night together, and we made each other laugh, and we did community theater together, and we, would go on car trips for 14 hours where we just talk and joke and make each other laugh. We had so much practice being funny together, entirely for each other's benefit. And we managed to turn that practice into, quickly kind of a successful career in comedy, which I think more than anything speaks to our shrewd resourcefulness. The only thing that I did more than making jokes with my family when I was growing up was playing video games, and Justin and I managed to turn that into a career too. Another kind of common goof at our expense is that we never let a moment go by that we don't record for some sort of product, and that one's super on the nose. But I was super uncertain on what I wanted to do growing up, even through college. The careers that I considered pursuing in my youth were very random. Like, I wanted to be a singer for a while. I wanted to be a movie star, which is, I guess, a broad category for I wanted people to know who I was, I guess. I wanted to be a psychologist. I wanted to be a youth minister. That was my plan for a very long time. And then I wanted to be some kind of journalist, which I guess I kind of did. And then in my sophomore year of high school, I had a teacher named Miss Ray, who was an English teacher, and she revived the TV news program at our high school. And at that time, me and my friends were making these terrible short videos with like handy cams and iMac editing software, and I decided I wanted to do that 45 minutes a day during the school day every day. So I started doing that, which was what got me interested in broadcast journalism, and it's why I decided to do that in college. So right around that time that my interest in the TV news stuff kind of peaked, my mom got sick. She was diagnosed with skin cancer, and she took on this really aggressive treatment. And that really aggressive treatment really threw our family for a loop. Her and Dad were traveling all the time to get that treatment. Travis was at college at Oklahoma University, and Justin was working for the Ironton Tribune, and so he was gone a whole lot. And it was kind of a scary time. It was... I think we were all super confident that everything was going to work out because we had lived a pretty charmed existence up to that point. And after a few horrible months of this treatment, she went into remission and life more or less went back to normal. And then the last semester of my senior year of high school, her cancer came back. And from the period that we learned that it came back to the day that she died was like 3 weeks. It was nothing. And I know this is a weird thing to include in a lecture about internet business, but stick with me. It was very bad. It was, it's the worst thing that could possibly happen to you back then, and none of us were equipped to deal with it because a lot of the emotional maturity that our family had at that time, and a lot of the skills that you younger folks would call adulting, those all came from Mom, and she was very much, I know it's cliche, but it was very much a glue that holds the family situation. So when she was gone, it just, everything I knew about life just dried up overnight. And when you go through a loss like that, it's terrible. And the second terrible thing that happens immediately after is just these aftershocks of the fate of you remaining a family unit just kind of being up in the air. There were times where we would have, like, Justin and Travis and Dad and I, we would have arguments. We would have, like, screaming arguments, and a lot of it was based mostly in sort of dramatics and hysterics because we were way out of our league, and we were all so raw and so mistakenly convinced that the others weren't doing enough to help out the family or whatever, and none of it was true. We were all just like doing a bad job at grieving, and I remember there was this one night. And I don't remember who said this, but even if I did, I probably wouldn't put them on blast like this, where we were having one of these arguments, and one of us just said, like, well, that's it. Let's just, you move away, and you'll go here, and that'll be it, and we'll just talk on holidays. And I think all of us realized, like, first of all, we were being kind of silly. And second of all, like, we were at a crossroads right then and there where it could have gone either way. We could have said, yeah, that sounds good, and then we didn't see each other except for holidays, and our family status was dissolved largely. Or we could decide to never let each other out of our sight ever again. And fortunately, we went with the latter. And this may seem like sentimental or whatever, but like the stuff that we do together, the creative work that we've done together for almost a decade now, I have nobody else in my life other than my wife who I could do that work with. Because the trust and patience and love involved with maintaining a professional career that doesn't affect your personal relationships and maintains your personal relationships in a way that doesn't affect your professional career. That's unthinkably hard. And the only way that we were able to do it is we went through this crucible in the aftermath of my mom's death, and we had this decision of we're going to be important parts of each other's lives for the rest of them, no matter what. And that decision is why we actually started working together in the first place. But before that happened, I was seduced by the siren call of video games journalism. So there's a weird chain of events that kind of led up to my games journalism career, the big break, as it were. So Justin was working for the Iron Tribune. This was a local paper for a town about 30 minutes outside of Huntington. It's where Dad currently lives today. And our local paper, the Herald-Dispatch, decided that the internet existed, and so they started making blogs. And so Justin and I started writing a video game blog for our local paper. And nobody read it. There was one company who made the video game adaptation of the DreamWorks movie Shark Tales, who inexplicably sent us a huge box just full of Shark Tales. And it was the most serious anyone ever took us, but we took ourselves plenty serious. So kind of off the back of our blog, Justin started pitching freelance work to all these different game magazines that we had grown up all reading and loving, and fledgling sort of video game websites. And he actually started to get some work. My favorite anecdote of his, and it kind of resembles how I actually thought about work once I got involved in the industry and was scared I was going to be booted out at any second, was he would tell these press outlets, like, give me the shittiest games that you have, and then you don't have to review them, and that'll free you up to play good games. And as somebody who worked in the industry for 10 years, that's a pretty enticing offer. And so he did that, and he started to get in these magazines. And as his younger brother, I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Travis was doing cool stuff at the time too, but it wasn't immediately involved with my professional development. So I'll hit you up with that on the next lecture. And eventually he applied to, and after a few applications, got a job at a website called Joystick with a Q, which was part of the AOL weblog ring when that existed. And he freelanced there for a couple of years, and then they hired him full-time as a reviews editor. And around that time, they were looking for a weekend editor, which I did this job for a while, so I feel pretty confident that I am able to say it's a pretty thankless and at times kind of shitty position, because you're on call all weekend. If any news breaks, you're expected to stop what you're doing and write it up, even if it's at 1 a.m. There's nobody else there to help you out. So they weren't getting a ton of applications for it, I assume, but I applied, and the editor-in-chief at the time, a guy named Chris Grant, who is also the editor-in-chief of Polygon and a very dear friend to this day, he had read our Herald-Dispatch game blog when he was hiring Justin, so he knew my byline and kind of knew my work, and so I applied, and I interviewed, and I ended up getting the job, and that was super, super exciting for me. At the same time, I was also like a full-time college student. I was pursuing my broadcast journalism degree, which by that time, this was 2007, I think I'd realized that I didn't want to work at a TV news station, and so I decided like I was just going to complete my degree in like just this state of constant quiet panic, which maybe some of you will find relatable. And then I got this job at Joystick, which one of the graduation requirements, it's actually my favorite thing about the journalism school that I attended, is that you have to do some work in the field before you can graduate. And where most of my peers were doing more traditional stuff, like radio stations and newspapers and apprenticeships at the local TV stations, I was working for an AOL video game blog, and none of them took me very seriously, but now print's dead, so fuck them. Sorry, print. That wasn't fair. That wasn't fair to print. Back then, you got paid $10 a post at AOL, and also I was dead broke. I had no money, and so I was compelled to write like the maximum amount of posts per month available to my position. And again, like with no support over the weekend, I was really flying without a net. But I loved it. Like, I was insistent that I wanted to work more. I wanted to do more than just the weekends. So eventually they bumped me up to working 4 days a week, Friday through Monday. But then that was just kind of weird timing. So they made me a contributing editor, which at the time basically meant somebody who writes posts during, Monday to Friday. But they didn't stop me as weekend editor, so I was literally working 7 days a week and writing 180 posts a month, which was the limit, the cap on what I was able to write. To complicate matters, in 2008, MTV launched a program called Street Team '08, where they would hire a hip, fresh, young journalist from every state who would then cover the 2008 presidential election, which I don't know if y'all remember was a pretty badass election. And I didn't know much about politics, but like everybody in my journalism school applied for this thing, including my girlfriend at the time, who was also in the journalism school. And I got it for West Virginia, which put a strain on a lot of my relationships at the journalism school. But it was great. I got to go to New York, and I got a bunch of like cool gear, and I made these video packages every week that I was super proud of, that like 25 people watched. But I got to meet Sway and Kurt Loder and have lunch with them, so that was reward enough for me. And like, this is the thing about my early career that's kind of a tough pill to swallow. I was working 7 days a week for Joystick, probably 50 hours a week at Joystick. I was not a full-time employee, mind you. I had no benefits. I actually went sans insurance for a while in my 20s, just kind of rolling the hard six on that one, hoping that I stayed healthy, and I didn't. And they never actually hired me in the 4 years that I worked there. They never hired me as a full-time employee, which now is illegal in most states, fortunately. If you're working full-time hours, you're expected to give people, full-time benefits and stuff, but that was not true back in the day. So I was doing that, the 50 hours a week at Joystick, and I was doing these weekly video packages for MTV, and I was a full-time student at Marshall trying to complete my degree in 4 years. And so I didn't have a social life, which is not my way of saying that I am an introvert, which I absolutely and completely am. I literally mean that I did not have time in my day to make friends. I didn't have time in my day to do anything. Because I was on call all weekend, like, there was no partying happening during that period. Not that I was getting, mad invites or anything like that. And I didn't mind. Like, I didn't mind at all that I was not developing as a social human being at all, because I was working and I was succeeding and I was happy with the work I was doing, and the work I was doing was being acknowledged by other people I worked with, and I felt valued, and I felt like I had a future because I was capable of producing lots and lots of passable work without dropping dead. And it's astonishing how long that way of thinking held true in my life until very recently. The idea that I was just indefatigable and immune to the effects of stress and isolation, which nobody is. And that's why you're hearing, every day about these self-made YouTube influencers who are like taking sabbaticals and, talking about their mental health finally, because it's easy when you're working that hard to think that you are invincible until all of a sudden you realize you haven't been, and then the cumulative, gunk that you have worked up, and the stress and the loneliness that you've worked yourself into is actually really bad for your brain. The good thing, though, to come out of all that work is that I did really well at Joystick. Eventually, they hired 2 new weekend editors, so I was able to leave that job behind and become a reviews editor, a job I was terrible at, but luckily I only had to do it for 5 months before we left that website to start Polygon. It was around the end of my time at Joystick in 2010. I had graduated college. I was living by myself in our family home that we had grown up in as it was kind of falling apart around me, and I realized, hey, this sucks, and decided that I loved West Virginia. I loved living there, but I really needed to go. And at that time, Travis was also back from OU, and he was kind of floundering a bit too. He had done some part-time jobs in the area. He went back to school for a semester, and nothing really came of it. And there was this day where we just looked at each other like, we could go, like we could help each other leave and take our first steps out of West Virginia. And so we did just that. We moved to Cincinnati, Ohio in 2009. Actually, we moved to a town called Batavia, Ohio, which is like 30 minutes outside of Cincinnati, and there's a mall there and a cheeseburger in paradise, and that's it. By the way, I hope you enjoyed the pre-show playlist. They told me they were doing that, and I was like, sure. And then I started getting tweets like, that's a lot of bare naked ladies, my man. So it was there in Batavia, Ohio, that podcasting entered my life. I had these 30-minute drives to Cincinnati anytime I wanted to do anything that was not related to mall or cheeseburger in paradise, which, those two things have me covered for most stuff. And 30 minutes there, 30 minutes back, that's like perfect podcast length. And this was 2010, and the medium had started to develop in all these exciting ways. So Travis turned me onto this show called You Look Nice Today, which was this very early podcast about just these three super funny guys. And I listened to the whole catalog super fast, and then I started over again, and I was just obsessed with it. And then I started branching out and finding my own podcast. I got turned on to a show called Yeah Dude, which is like a really OG podcast that is still going today. It's just like a news recap show that I still love very, very dearly. And most notably, Jordan Jesse Go on the Maximum Fun Network. And while I was getting into those, Justin was actually, he had started to co-host a video game podcast for Joystick alongside Chris Grant and another Joystick writer, a guy named Ludwig Kietzman, who was hysterically funny. And that show actually started to gain a considerable following, considering how sort of competitive the gaming podcast market was. And then I eventually started guesting on that show while I was still working at Joystick. And then I started guesting more and more frequently. And then people started to know who I was. It was like the first personality-forward stuff I had ever done in my career, and people started to know my name, which up to that point I was just this anonymous news grunt who was, shitting out 180 posts per month. I needed that money to live, which I did. And then people, all of a sudden, I started to be on the podcast, and people kind of knew who I was. And I was a super shy kid who struggled to talk to strangers, which made me just a great fit for the journalism program. And so when people started to know who I was, it was really, really weird. So all these things kind of came together when me and Travis were living together in Batavia. There were kind of these two forces that led directly to my brother and me. Justin and I were doing the Joystick podcast and loved doing it. And also at the same time, we were more geographically scattered than we had ever been. And we didn't like that. Justin and I, loved working together at Joystick, and we wanted to do something with Travis. And we all loved podcasts. So Justin suggested one April day in 2010 that we should do a podcast together, and it was an easy yes from all of us. And it boggles my mind when I think back to how slapdash that whole process was of putting the first episode of My Brother and Me together, because it changed my life more than anything I've ever made, I guess, if you want to look at it as sort of an important thing that happened. We agreed to make a podcast on a Monday. On Wednesday, we got together in an AOL Instant Messenger chat room, which really freezes this story in amber for future paleontologists who carbon date it. We were in this AOL Instant Messenger chat room, and this text log, I saved it because I could sense its cosmic importance. And it exists somewhere in a hard drive somewhere in my house. I have so many hard drives, and I tried to find it for y'all, but I couldn't. But in this 45-minute long AOL chat, we picked a name for the show, we picked a theme song, and we picked what the show was going to be about. In 45 minutes, Travis, the first line in the chat I remember is me saying, "Okay, so the theme song's got to be "Take a Chance on Me" by ABBA," and Justin and Travis were like, "Yes, yes, yes." And we did that for 30 episodes, and then we got very afraid that ABBA was going to take every red cent that we had ever owned. And we decided to frame the show as an advice show, mostly because it was 2010, and folks were already kind of getting tired of the, a handful of dudes talking about stuff genre. So we thought the advice angle would kind of help set the show apart. So that was on a Wednesday. On Friday, we recorded the first episode. I used a Rock Band microphone that came with the video game Rock Band. Travis used a built-in mic on his PC tower, and Justin used a $10, the skinniest headset I've ever seen. Travis and I were recording from the same apartment in Batavia, but in separate rooms because we were lunatics. But we did it. We just did it. in the span of 5 days, we agreed to do it, decided what it was going to be, and did it and released it. And the luckiest break we got was, fortunately, because of the Joystick podcast and the audience that had grown there, we had a portion of that audience who knew who we were and latched onto our show from the beginning. And it wasn't enormous, but it was enough. It was this seed, and they were so great. They were so awesome and helped to build us up in a really, really important way when we were just starting out. I remember, like, a couple episodes in, people were making fan art. And like that was the best thing that had ever happened. I was so excited about that this thing that we were making as a family was resonating with other people, and that experience and that feeling has only grown exponentially, which has made me like the luckiest person in the whole universe. And so we did it for a few months, and then I moved from Batavia to Chicago with a couple friends that I had made in Cincinnati, and basically experienced another year of frozen solitude. And at that point, Travis and I didn't live together, which made doing the podcast all the more important. And it was during the winter that I lived in Chicago, one January day in 2011. I was stocking up for like blizzard survival sundries at the Trader Joe's, and I was checking out, and I was looking at my email on my phone, and I saw that we had, out of nowhere, gotten an email from Jesse Thorne, host of Jordan Jesse Go on the Maximum Fun Network, and he asked us if we wanted to join. Because some listeners of his show had suggested that he listened to ours, and he did, and he liked it, and he wanted us to be a part of the network of this show that we all loved. And I flipped shit in the Trader Joe's checkout aisle. I ran out to my car, and I called Justin and Travis, like, check your email! And we were all just like in disbelief that this incredible thing had just happened. So we joined and started to make a little bit of money off of Mabim Bam once we hit our first pledge drive a couple months later, and we started to get some advertisers, which Maximum Fun helps their constituent shows set up. And that was like novel. It was not anywhere near something that we could support ourselves on. On my 24th birthday that April in Chicago, we did our first live show opening for Jordan Jesse Go at the main stage of Second City, and that was a real mom spaghetti moment. That was a real. Which is to say, I yurtsed backstage at Second City due to nerves. I still get like stage fright every time I walk on stage to deliver a lecture to the student body of FSU. But that was like the most intense that it had ever been. But we did it, and it was fun, and people liked it. So we started organizing our own live shows by ourselves, which was such a bad idea. Usually they were in our hometowns because we were lazy. So I booked a couple in Austin at this art warehouse where we showed up the day of the show a couple hours before showtime, and somebody walked out of the warehouse and handed us the keys and left. And we were like, oh no. So we tweeted, does anybody know how to run a soundboard and lights? And our friends and significant others took tickets, and it was very bohemian. And so it kind of kept going like that. We did more live shows, we got more advertisers as the years passed, and we did more pledge drives. We had more listeners, and we would get more donors, and it became more and more of a reality that we could support ourselves doing this. And it kind of turned into a part-time job. And then in 2014, Justin and Sydney were expecting their first child, and we wanted to give Justin, some time off. So we recorded a couple episodes of Mabim Bam in advance. One of which, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, had just come out, and I wanted to play it, and I didn't have any friends in Chicago, so I tricked my family into playing it professionally. So we recorded this episode of Mabim Bam that was just all of us playing D&D, and we played it with our dad, who we kind of brought into the fold in the same way that Justin and I, who had worked together at Joystick for a while, wanted to do something with Travis. The three of us were having so much fun doing this thing that we wanted to bring Dad into it because we were excited to be doing it, and we love each other, and we wanted to have fun together. So we recorded this episode, and we didn't know what to expect from it. We didn't know what the response was going to be, and we published it, and there was a lot of demand for us to keep doing it, so we launched it as the Adventure Zone, not really knowing whether it was going to be anything or not, and then it turned out to be the biggest thing that we had ever done. We started to eventually, after a year or so, started to dabble in more dramatic storytelling and less RPG goofy goof table talk, and that surprisingly to all of us, really like resonated with the audience that show had found, because we had thought of ourselves as just these comedy clowns the entire time we were doing Mabim Bam, but that show, the Adventure Zone, really started to mean something else to the people who started listening to it. Justin likes to describe Taz as a car that started to fly, which I love because it's a very flattering metaphor, but it also, if you could imagine being in a car as it starts to fly and how terrifying that would be. Because the show got big, it got scary big pretty fast, and as the DM, I felt this enormous pressure to deliver this like complex and satisfying narrative. First of all, to my family, who I was running a D&D game for, which if any of you DM Dungeons and Dragons game, my heart goes out to you. It's a lot of fist pumping, a lot of silent fist pumping in the air, which I love. Y'all are the best. And doing that work, doing that writing to impress my family and the audience that we had was super hard work. So I had moved to Austin in the summer of 2011, and that's where I met my wife, Rachel, and we got married very quickly. We got engaged like a year later and then got married in 2013. And I had found a social life in Austin that was like unlike anything I'd ever had before since I left Huntington. And for like the first time in my adult life, I was really happy, but my workload was buck wild. I was full-time at Joystick and then launching Polygon, which is kind of a terrifying work upheaval that involved a lot of labor to get that thing off the ground, the whole time just like crossing our fingers that it was going to work out. And eventually it did, which is great. And we were doing Mabim Bam. We were doing more and more live shows for Mabim Bam. I was traveling for Polygon from time to time, and I was just writing Taz all the time. Every free moment I had during the workday, I was writing Taz. Rachel would go to sleep, and I'd stay up for a couple more hours and just write more Taz. If I had an idea for something, Taz stands for the Adventure Zone. Sometimes I don't know what audience I'm speaking to, and I don't want you to think I'm writing like weird Looney Tunes fan fiction. But it was hard work. It was time-consuming work, but I loved it. Like, I loved pouring myself into it. And I had this like super important realization that has really shaped my work ethic ever since. And it is this realization that there is no upper limit on the amount of work that you can put into most things to improve them. I could write my ass off to come up with new and exciting ideas for our campaign. And the more that I did that, the more I wrote, the more I could delete the old stuff I wrote and come up with even better stuff. And so the show would get better because of it. I started editing Mabim Bam like pretty early on, and I didn't know what I was doing, so I taught myself how to do it. And the more time I spent on the edit, the better the show got. And that was especially true for Adventure Zone, especially once we started doing music. In the fall of 2015, about a year in, I wanted to put music in the show because I thought it would be like a good way to underscore these dramatic moments. But I didn't know how to license music. I didn't know how to like pay for it. And I didn't know like what kind of budget we could potentially set aside for that. So I was like, how hard could it be to make music yourself? And with that hubris and like a metric ton of GarageBand loops, I started to make music for the Adventure Zone, and the show got better because of it. And I, took YouTube tutorials on how to use the software and some online classes on like music theory. And the more work I put into it, the better the show got, and there didn't seem to be any limit on how much work I could do. And the audience like saw those changes too, and the show just just exploded. But like I said, it was a ridiculous amount of work. On top of the other podcasts we were doing, and my role as deputy news editor at Polygon, which was a weird fit for me. I was never really happy in that role because, again, like me in journalism, we were never just a great fit. And I actually had thought about quitting. Travis had done so. He had quit the Cincinnati Shakespeare company he had worked at. And was doing podcasting full time, and he moved out to LA with his wife Teresa to like support himself doing the podcast. And I thought about doing the same thing, about leaving Polygon, not about moving to LA. I would never. But around that time, Vox started to get more focused on making video content, and Polygon needed somebody to do that on their end. And I saw that as the next Vine that I could swing to, because if I screwed it up, like, what's the worst that could happen? I was thinking about leaving anyway. And so for the next year, like, I taught myself how to make videos, and hopefully videos that people would watch. And after about a year of doing that and not really breaking through, we had this all-hands video conference in New York. And after talking about it, we came to the realization that, like, we just need to do goofs, y'all. And so I came up with the idea of Monster Factory there and pitched it. Thank you. We just recorded a new one yesterday. Oh my God, it's so good. And so I pitched it at that video conference, and then as soon as we went home, we recorded it, and I edited it, and we posted it, and it did super well. And that series, that pilot even, established the tone of every other piece of video content I would ever do for that website, and I loved it. It made me so happy. And you know, the work I was doing at Polygon started to take off, and Adventure Zone was taking off, and Bim Bam we were touring more and more with, and there was just this critical mass of things that I was working on and, you know, proud of, and working on them very hard. And I was still very much in that mindset of, like, I'm invincible. I have infinite time and stamina, and my brain can't be killed. So it was with that mindset that we decided, let's add a few more things to the pile. And so I started to do, like, more and more stuff at Polygon. I would just have an idea for a video, and then it would just spiral into a video series. And, like, I want to play World of Warcraft. That's a bad idea when you're as busy as I was. But what if we make a video series out of it? Haha, clever life hack, Griffin. Rachel and I, you know, love each other very much and love talking to each other very much. So of course we have to do a podcast together. And we were watching The Bachelor religiously with our friends at that time. And so, you know, why not make a podcast about it? And then eventually the show came up with an answer for that question, which is because the show sucks and is the show got exponentially grosser from the period that we started doing the show. And we had a miserable time just, like, watching it, let alone recording a show about it every week. And so we changed formats and started doing a show called Wonderful that is just us talking. Thank you. It's just, it's the diametric opposite of our Bachelor Recap podcast, where we just talk about things we like and make us happy every week, and it's like a joy to record that show. We were nearing the end of the first Adventure Zone campaign, which we had started touring with as well, and we were approached by a literary agent who said, you should do a graphic novel of this, and we said, who would want that? And then a publisher called First Second said, we would very much like that. And so we teamed up with Carrie Peach, who was an artist in the fan community of Taz, who had made all this incredible fan art, and started working with her to make this graphic novel. And it took a long time to figure out how to make that first book, how to adapt a podcast of a game into a written thing on a page. And it was tough because we actually started writing book 2, which comes out this summer, the AdventureZoneComic.com. We had started writing book 2 before book 1 came out, and you know, we were used to this instant feedback loop of just making something and putting it up and seeing what people thought of it, and that doesn't happen in book publishing. So we didn't know what to really expect, and then it came out and was the #1 New York Times bestseller, and that was by far the weirdest call I've ever gotten in my entire life. It was also like a weird, our publisher called me first for some reason, and then, like, the etiquette of, like, waiting for my brothers and dad to find out, and, like, do I text them? I don't want to burst the bubble. That was a weird day, man. And then I got approached to write a story for a Star Wars short story compilation called A Certain Point of View, and I was like, yes, yes, I will write your short story for your Star Wars book. Are you sure? We started to do an annual podcast about the movie Paul Blart Mall Cop 2 with... A lot of Paul Blart Mall Cop 2 fans in the house. With our two friends and incredibly funny comedians from New Zealand, Tim and Guy. It's called Till Death Do Us Blart, and the premise is if one of us dies, we have named a successor, so the show will continue through the end of linear time. The movie Trolls came out, and Justin... There were a few prominent YouTubers who got cast in it, and Justin watched the movie 1,000 times with his daughter, and then we got super high in Portland and said, why can't we be in the next Trolls movie? And so with the same amount of prep work that apparently goes into all of our pilots, we recorded right then and there. The McElroy brothers will be in Trolls 2, now Trolls World Tour. And then last summer we found out we'd succeeded in our quixotic quest. And it was during that time that I expressed interest in doing some more voice acting work, and we have a ton of awesome folks who listen to our shows who work in animation and games and stuff like that. So we started to do voice acting work, started touring more and more. We got a booking agency who started to book us bigger and bigger venues. We were doing like a weekend a month usually, 3 cities a tour. we worked with a talent agent who got us the Mabim Bam TV show on CISO, which was NBC's short-lived alt-comedy streaming platform. Pour one out, rip CISO. And so in September 2016, we took 3 weeks off everything that we were doing, which like is hard to do when your schedule is as busy as ours was, and we just knocked out these 6 episodes in Huntington, just shooting on this brutal schedule. And it was hectic and it was scary because it was unlike any other work we'd done before, and we were pretty sure we were going to make a very bad TV show. But we got it done, and then the next February it came out, and we were really happy with it, and the fans were happy with it. And then a few months later, CISO shut down, which I don't think it was our fault. So like all these things kept popping up, and some of them we actively pursued, some of them kind of fell in our laps, but we said yes to all of it. And I'm glad that we did that work. I'm glad that it got made. I really am. But around that time, we also like started settling down with our families. A month after we shot the TV show, Travis and Teresa had their first child, and then a month to the day after that, Rachel and I had our first child, our only child. I don't know why I said first. I've got 15 children. And it didn't take me long to like look at this pile of work that had accumulated, exponentially. Oftentimes when I wasn't looking directly at that pile, and so I considered the pile and I said, "Oh no, this is unsustainable." And so in the summer of 2017, things kind of reached a breaking point. Like we were balancing all of these different things at once, and we felt this abstract pressure of like a dozen other things that we could be doing. Like we would talk with people about doing another TV show, or a season 2 of Mabim Bam, or like any project that whatever company approached us that could happen. And like when you have this like miasma, this like cloud of things that could be happening, and you don't do any of them because you're not sure if they're a good idea or not, you feel constantly like you're failing, like you are, like you're not living up to your potential, or you're not getting the things done that you need to get done. And that was a terrible feeling. And we were luckily all kind of on the same page, which was we need to slow down. I am proud of the fact that I have always set a firm barrier between work time and family time. I drop my son off at daycare and pick him up, and when I pick him up, like that's it. I walk out of the house and get in my car, and that's it for work. And I kept that very sacred, but there's nothing that can like defend against me being like high strung all the time because of the amount of work I was doing, or keeping me from having to stay up late at night after Henry and Rachel go to bed and finishing the work that I have to do, and then being tired all day the next day when we're supposed to be playing together. It started to have just a really detrimental effect on all of our lives, and so we took steps to pare down. And for me, the big part of that was leaving Polygon, which I did in April of last year. We are still doing Monster Factory on a monthly basis because they can pry that from our cold, dead hands. But my role at the job was a lot more than that. I remember, I was exhausted, and my time to spend at Polygon was, crumbling a bit, and I could feel my interest and like my passion for doing this job like kind of start waning. And it was around that time that we started to hire a new wave of video team employees, and looking at all these applications and all of these video submissions, all these incredible video submissions. I just knew that like my interest in doing this job, my passion for this job, had been completely eclipsed, and it was time for me to kind of leave and free up the money for them to hire them. And so I left Polygon, and we put some of our bigger ideas to bed. We started to say no to things, some projects that could potentially come to fruition, and we started to focus on things that like really, really mattered to us, and only taking on new jobs that were like manageable. We started to take on things that we knew we could just knock out in a couple of weeks, or had a deadline that we could meet and be done with it. And so yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now. An unexpected great thing about sort of taking on that philosophy is that when something comes around that we really do want to do, now we have time to do it because it's not part of this weird cloud of potential projects. Last August, when the graphic novel came out and hit the Times bestseller list, someone from Marvel reached out to our literary agent and said, "Hey, we're doing this this mini-series called War of the Realms in the Thor canon, and do you guys want to take some big heroes and do whatever the hell you want with them?" And we were like, "Well, let's check our Google Calendar. Yes, give us Spider-Man. Give us your Spider-Man, and we'll do it." And that's been a bracing experience. It's been incredible. It's been especially a dream come true for my dad, who actually used to work in the comics industry many moons ago, before we were doing podcasts. And you feel a lot of pressure. I felt the same way with the Star Wars short story I wrote, not to break this enormous IP that had meant so much to me growing up. And so there's certain considerations that go into that we don't have to do in our goof-ass podcasts. I remember actually for when I was writing the Star Wars short story, I had some bit in there where I said something about he felt the earth between his toes or something like that, referring to dirt as earth, and the editor got back and was like, earth doesn't exist in Star Wars. And I was like, oh shit. Didn't even think about that. And all of these things, all these opportunities had a way of compounding on top of one another, and some of them we can attribute to just having cool fans who are working on cool stuff and asked us to work with them, and a lot of it kind of mutated off side projects that we were already doing, and the more we did, the more there was to do, and after doing that for too much for too long, we kind of realized what was important to us and what to prioritize, which brings us to where we are today. We're still doing the Bim Bam every week. We're at about 450 episodes of that show, which is buck wild. Adventure Zone is on its second season, and it still is time-consuming as it ever was. My wife and I are still doing Wonderful every week, and that show is still a joy to record. And we're traveling, usually doing one travel thing a month, whether it's PodCon in January or a 3-city tour on a weekend in February, or for March we're going on a cruise, the Joko cruise out of Fort Lauderdale in 2 days, which I need to pack for. And everything on top of that, is variable, and it is also budgeted fiercely. Last year, one of the best things we've ever done was hire Amanda, who's our business manager, who has helped us after 10 years of pretending to be a business, actually start behaving like one. And having that budget of what our time is, helps us to do stuff that actually interests us when the opportunity comes around, no joke, doing a lecture for Florida State University. So that's the history of the show and the family business. And if you tuned out of all that, I don't really blame you. But I thought it would be helpful to kind of talk about some takeaways that you all might find, maybe practical if this is maybe the kind of work that you're interested in doing, or any kind of self-made creative work. And the big question that I never know how to answer is how do I get a job in games journalism or online, whatever, because there's not one answer to that. There are tons of different answers to that. But one sort of constant in all those is you get very lucky. And that's not false humility. You get lucky, and a lot of the ones who make it just got lucky. Justin, Travis, and I are all, cis-het white dudes, which obviously introduces an unfair imbalance in, finding those lucky breaks. And again, Justin likes to attribute our success to Gallagher, the watermelon smashing man. Because he wrote this feature on this terrible full-motion video game that Gallagher made, and Chris Grant read it, and that's why he decided to hire Justin. And that was the chain of events that led me to standing on this stage today. If it weren't for Gallagher, I wouldn't be here, which is kind of a horrible realization. So that said, here's a few things that I think could be helpful if you want to make stuff online. The first thing, and this is a really lazy one, is to not just do what you love, do what you're already doing. Which is not me saying give up on your dreams. It's me saying if you subscribe to the Malcolm Gladwell outliers 10,000 hours theory, where you have to do something for 10,000 hours to be considered an expert at it, joking around the dinner table, we had 10,000 hours of making jokes for each other and making each other laugh, before we started doing a podcast together. I almost certainly had 10,000 hours of video game time logged by the time I was age 10, so I was uniquely equipped to do that job as well. I genuinely believe that everybody has something, or maybe a few things, that they know more about than 95% of the rest of us, and a lot of those things are things that I want to hear about. And I think that's true for a lot of people, because human beings just have infinite capacity for curiosity. So if you have something that you're good at and that you know about and that you're already doing, and you think there's other people who would like to hear about it, that's probably something you should think about pursuing. This one's going to sound shitty at the top, too. Know the meaning of hard work. And I promise I don't mean it like an angry baby boomer. Like, I'm sure you all get enough of that already. I mean it. When am I supposed to drink water? We didn't talk about this ahead of time. Oh, man. I feel like Marco Rubio during that one State of the Reunion. I mean, know the meaning of hard work in like a more literal and personal sense. Like figuring out what is hard work for you is like an impossible, constantly moving target. I've been working from home for 12 years now, and I have constantly reevaluated what it means like to do a good day's work. And starting out, like that meant I didn't have a boss breathing down my physical neck, and so my desk and computer, which had World of Warcraft on it, was in the same room as my bed, and like those two things were available, and I could just do them instead of working, and fighting that off was a difficult thing. And then obviously I overcorrected a bit, and work was all I did, and then I'd burn out, and I'd have to dial it back. And after going through that pattern enough times, you start to like lose context for when you're working enough. I would have periods, and I still do this, where I have enormous guilt that I am not living up to my potential, that I'm not doing the work that I know I can do. And then if I take a step back and look at it, I say like, I'm actually working myself to the bone. I'm working too much, and I'm just not. I don't have good context for it. And then I'll have times where I'm like, oh my god, I'm dead on my feet. I'm so tired. I've been working so much. And then I'll get to the end of the day and be like, you played Diablo for like 3 hours today. And your brain just like tricks yourself into like not actually knowing how you're doing. This is less a piece of advice because I don't actually know a great way to dial it in and stay dialed in, because that's hard work in and of itself. But expect it. Like, be patient with the fact that your workday is going to constantly change. You're going to work hard, and you're going to work hard up to what you think is your limit that you can feel good about, and still be happy doing other things at the end of the day. And by the way, like in the modern, shitty gig economy, you're going to have people who tell you that actually that's not enough, and if you don't work 10 times harder than that, we're going to replace you because you're easily replaced. And if you do end up at a place like that, leave, because you're never going to be happy there. This one is kind of a cheat. Collaborate with people you love. I had this sort of genetically built in. I'm not saying that you should work with your family, because very few people should. But if you're trying to like forge a new career path by yourself, you're going to make it 1,000 times harder than it needs to be if you try and do it alone. So maybe it is family, maybe it's close friends and loved ones, maybe it's people whose work you really admire, even if it's in other fields, who want to work with you. Every part of the creative process is improved by having other people doing it alongside you, and the added benefit of that is you're not lonely all the time, and I can't stress how important that is. And by collaborate, I don't even necessarily mean co-host a podcast together. Just make somebody a part of it, which brings me to find a source of feedback that matters to you. Find a few, ideally. Starting out, like, find a friend who knows something about the thing you're trying to do, even if they're just an enthusiast, and make that friend be brutally honest with you, with the stuff that you're making. And have them be brutally honest because they love you, and they don't want you to embarrass yourself, and they want you to make the best thing that they know you can make. This friend will be very hard to find. But you can also make yourself this person. Like, be honest with yourself. And this is another tightrope walk where if you are overly critical of your work, you'll never make anything. But if you can like be your own honest critic, your own fair critic, you will know when your work is ready for other people to see, and that is an important moment. And then if you're lucky enough to find an audience, for God's sakes, listen to what they have to say. This is another thing that changed so much for us over the time we were doing the podcast. Starting out, we said a lot of dumb shit on my brother and me, a lot of like unintentionally, but that doesn't matter, a lot of hurtful shit. And our listeners, who exhibited an amount of like patience that we did not deserve, told us how much it hurt them and why it hurt them. And so we felt terrible about that, and we tried to stop doing it. And the show and all the shows that we do today are what they are today, largely because of what they taught us. They cared about our show. And a lot of them cared about us as people, and they wanted us to be better. So of course, like, that feedback mattered. And there are, of course, like, also sources of feedback of people who, on a different end of things, just like thought that they could make a funnier show than us, and so they never let us hear the end of it. There started to be people who kind of defined themselves by the fact that they didn't like us and the work that we did, and they never hesitated to let us know about it. And there were people who, like, had feedback, but, like, they didn't care if it was good or helpful or, like, had anything to do with what we were doing. They just wanted to say something out loud. And if you treat that stuff like the important stuff, then whatever you're making is going to crash and burn. And if you get so fed up with that stuff that you don't listen to any feedback, then your show's also going to crash and burn. So know the difference between the two, find the feedback that matters, and really listen to it. And get interested in learning and improving your craft. I was a terrible student. I was a really, really, really bad student. I was very good at, like, taking tests, which made me an infuriating person to be a student alongside. But I was not interested in learning. I just wasn't. And that's a cruel joke, because now I'm 31 and I realize how little I know, and I'm like, I would love to actually learn some stuff. Can I get an honorary doctorate for this? How's that work? Wait, I don't think you actually immediately know things when they give you an honorary doctorate. I was working at Joystick, and I remember I was like, I can do this here. I can just, like, slip by not knowing anything. But I was working on the weekends. I didn't have any backup, and so I would mess up a lot. And I knew I was, one bad post away from losing this incredible shot that I had. And so I started to go to my coworkers and learn directly from them. And, I memorized the AP style book front and back, and I started to check and double check and triple check every post I wrote before I published it. And I got better at that job, and I took a lot of satisfaction in it. Learning to edit the podcast and improving my editing, learning to write music and improving how I make music. That stuff improved the work that we did, which is satisfying, but I also took pleasure in the learning of the thing. And ideally, that's what's going to happen with you too. If you love the thing that you're doing, learning to do it better is not going to be a painful thing. It's going to be, like, a wonderful thing. And it's also going to show you, like, that your show can improve and how it can improve. But it's also, like, important to not judge yourself by the work that, like, the best people in your field are doing. Because again, if you do that, like, you're never going to make anything. The road from, like, where you are, the starting point to where they are is enormous and winding. And again, there's, like, tons of roads that will get you there. Not all of them require, a formal education. There's resources online and communities that can help you do anything. So find them, and then, enjoy the process of improving your craft. And the last point that I had here that I'm going to take a drink of water about, so don't laugh at me, you monsters. Oh, man. Usually when there's three of us, I can, like, not talk for an hour and sneak those in. My last point is, take care of yourself. You should be doing this anyway, but especially if you decide to, make your own art or I can't believe I just referred to my shit as art, but you've heard me, like, refer to mental health a couple times in this lecture, and it's only something that, like, embarrassingly recently did I start to realize it's a factor in my life that I need to take seriously, because it's so easy when you're on your grind to feel like you are impervious to the effects of stress and anxiety and sleep deprivation and exhaustion and creative burnout and social isolation and malicious feedback. For me, like, I was doing 5 jobs at once and looking at myself like, I'm fucking RoboCop. And I get that all the time from listeners who, like, anytime we make something new, they're like, I don't know how you have time to do all this stuff. And, my immediate response is, well, I'm fucking RoboCop. But the real answer is, like, yeah, I'm really not taking very good care of myself. And I know it's unfair for me to, like, stand up here and say, like, don't work too hard, because it's because of that work that I'm standing here in the first place. It's because of the, like, week-long stints in Batavia where I was working around the clock and I literally didn't leave the house. And the whole time I was just like, what's depression? What? And it's because of that work that, like, I, in some part, found success. And I don't know how things would have been different if I'd taken more time for myself. I don't know how things would have changed if I had taken vacations. Like, I don't know. But what I do know, and where I messed up, and honestly, like, I don't have many regrets in my life, but this thing, like, I regret maybe more than anything, is that the thought that I was maybe doing something bad for me literally never crossed my mind. So it's unfair for me to stand up here and say, like, I did the work, but maybe you shouldn't because it can mess you up. But what I will say is, find what you want to do, find what you're already doing if you're lazy like us, find what you're good at, and find people to help you along the way, and hold yourself accountable for what you know you can do, and try super hard. But while you're doing all that, don't let yourself forget about your own happiness, or your sense of community, or your health, or don't let yourself forget about literally everything else in the world while you're chasing that dream. Don't undervalue those things. Don't think that you are somehow above needing them, because nobody is. You're not invincible. I'm realizing now this is kind of a bummer way to end the lecture, is saying that you're. But if you take away one thing from everything I have to say today, let it be that you are not RoboCop, and I'm sorry that you had to find out this way. So that's all I have prepared for you. We're going to do, I guess, some Q&A. Do we have the microphones out? Where are these microphones I've heard so much about? This will be nice, because then you all will have to talk, and I will be able to drink this delicious, non-branded water. Thank you. Okay, I think we have the microphones out. I don't know how long we're going to be going, so we may have to cut folks off eventually, but if the spirit moves you and you want to come down and ask questions, we can just like ping pong around between the different microphones. I'm watching a very polite interaction happening over to my left. I'm seeing a lot of people line up. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you that line's probably going to be too long, so I guess people will come and tell you when to cut the line off. But we will start over here. Hi, hello.
Okay. Hi, Griffin.
Hey, what's up?
So, I actually wasn't planning on coming to ask a question, but you said something in your lecture. You said that there's no upward bound on how much you can improve something.
Yes.
And so I was wondering, like, what was your motivation in those early years, especially when you didn't have an audience or anything like that? What was your motivation to keep improving what you were doing and working that hard?
Starting out, it was mostly unconsciously that I was doing that I was actually like getting better, because we weren't taking the podcast very seriously when we started doing it, because we didn't think it was going to be anything but like a fun family experiment. And so I learned how to get better at editing just by doing it, because it needed to get done. And Justin and Travis, I'm the youngest brother, and so a lot of the time I get made to do the things that the other two don't want to do. And that's been true of editing now for a decade. Man, I really need to pass the buck back that way. So originally, like, it was just like I had to do it, and unconsciously got better. I wouldn't say I was like working harder at it. And then I think like the thing that kind of pushed us forward was Adventure Zone. I think we all kind of realized like Adventure Zone was becoming something kind of special, and we wanted to make it like the best thing that it could possibly be. Like, we all loved doing Mabim Bam, and we all thought it was a fun show to make. But Adventure Zone felt like something else entirely. It felt like a story we were telling together, and so the editing needed to be better for that to make it what we wanted it to be. And so that was really where I started to take it super, super seriously. But starting out, it was just like I did it because I had to do it, and I got better just because I was doing it, which is a fine way to start doing things. Yeah. Thanks. Hey.
Hi.
What's up?
That is very loud. Hi, my name is Lily.
Hi, Lily.
I actually host a podcast called The Good Boys Girls, which is a McElroy fan podcast that I host with my girlfriend.
Yeah, that's sweet.
We are hosted by the Lunar Light Studio Network, which is actually a network that I own because
sick.
I was 18 and thought, I'm starting a podcast. I should probably also start a network.
Yeah, why not?
That's not how it works, but
It can be.
I didn't know that at the time. So my question for you is really just about like podcast business stuff,
Sure.
mostly like finding advertisers and how you deal with like the financial side of things. Because I'm a student here.
Yes.
And so my girlfriend is 25 and she's also in college, and so the both of us are trying to juggle school, but also like how to incorporate our business. And
Yes.
yeah, it's
that part. We're just now doing that.
yeah, I know.
So
it's really complicated.
I will fess up to the fact that I complained about Justin and Travis making me edit, but really we all have deliberated like different jobs to different people, and so like I'm the post-production guy and pre-production on Taz, and Travis does pre-production on Mabim Bam and was very much our outreach guy for a long time, and Justin was involved in handling the business stuff, so I don't have a lot of like knowledge on that. And then when we hired Amanda, she who's our business manager, she knows how to do this stuff, and we were all so busy that we didn't have time to like figure out how to do it. Fortunately, like joining Maximum Fun, they were able to do these things for us, which they do for all of their shows. So in terms of like finding advertisers, I mean, we managed to attract the attention of advertisers by kind of going above and beyond. Early days in Mabim Bam, I would write songs bespoke for every advertiser we ever had, which was bonkers now that I think back on it, and going above and beyond like that, like attracted more and more people to our show, which of course like you can't do unless you already have an audience. I think what you're doing is kind of incredible, because I can't imagine starting a podcast network. Like we do lots of shows and we have lots of people who say like, why don't you do your own network? And first of all, like because we like being a part of Max Fun, but also like I don't know how to do it. None of us know how to do it. So yeah, I would hit up Jesse Thorne. Not a joke. He will answer your email. He's a very sweet man.
Yeah.
And he'll be able to hook you up for sure.
Very cool. Thank you very
Thanks.
much.
Hey,
Hi.
how's it going?
I sound like a whole new person.
I know, it's wonderful, isn't it?
No.
I'm drinking more water than I've ever drank in my entire life now. This is a sweet vacation.
All right, okay. My name is Patricia Mahaffey, but you can call me Tot.
Okay.
I hope you can hear my voice over the sound of my beating heart. But are you hiring?
Am I hiring?
Yeah,
For what?
everything. You will be surprised how far I can stretch my limited skill set.
It's not a bad question, because actually we've hired 2 people in the last year, which is we own a small business, which is hey everybody, it's me, Griffin Mcelroy, small business owner. I'm who you may have heard me from politics. They talk about me a lot. Am I hiring? No, I am not, if I'm being completely honest. We have dabbled in the hiring arts from time to time. Obviously, the hires we've made in the last couple of years, or the last year, have changed our lives and been incredible. But before that, we had used assistants from time to time. We actually hired an editor for Mabim Bam who did like 3 episodes, and it didn't work out. And then I was like, oh, I'm never letting anybody else touch our podcast ever again. Sorry, you're asking the perfect wrong McElroy, because I am, just as a result of the fact that I am in charge of post-production, is like I'm the last one to have a hand on the ball before people hear it. And so I'm such a perfectionist that the idea of handing over control of anything is a problem for me, and again, I'm working real hard to fix that. But unfortunately, at the moment, no. But I'll let you know, I guess.
Oh, yes, please do. I'll continue to admire from a distance.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you. Hey.
Hi, I think this is a good.
Yeah, get right on it. Yeah, you're good.
Oh, okay, my name is Emily. I don't want to be a bummer,
Okay.
but last October, my best friend lost her mother to cancer, and I can see how it's just totally derailed her life. And I mean, she obviously has to go through the grieving process, but I don't live like anywhere close to her anymore, and I can see her sort of turning in on herself. And as someone who lives far away, I don't know what I can do for her. As someone who's been through that grieving process, do you have any advice on what someone on the outside can do?
This is an incredible question, and I hope I can hold it together while talking about it. So my mom died in 2005, right? That was a while ago, and because of this sort of invincibility that I felt at work, like that that affected actually every part of kind of like how I thought about myself and my personality and my brain, which was to say like I thought like I coped with what happened very, very well because I was, I thought I was invincible. And then a couple of years ago, a close friend of mine, his dad passed away suddenly in a car accident. For a number of reasons, I was kind of coming to terms with my needing to take my mental health seriously, and I realized, like, oh, maybe I didn't do a very good job coping with that. And so I chickened out, and I didn't reach out to him because who was I to tell this guy what to do? Because I did a bad job with it. And then it was like a year later, and we went on a trip together, and I apologized. I said, I'm so sorry that I didn't come to you. I just felt like I was such a fuck up at it that I wouldn't know what to say. And he said, I appreciate you apologizing, because he could have just said anything. And when he said that, I was happy that we had, gotten this weird thing out of the air, but I was also kind of gutted because he was right. Your friend's probably it's a tough thing, and there is no easy fix for it, obviously for a long period of time, but and I know it's cliche, but just being there is the most important thing. I can't remember a lot from when my mom died because that's sort of a post-traumatic thing. That first year is just kind of a blur to me, but what I do remember is my friend Finley, who I was in a play with, went to GameStop and bought this shitty Star Wars Episode 2 video game or something. It was a fighting game, and he brought it over to my house a week after my mom died, and we just played it. I remember that. So, do that. Okay. If you can, do that, because I promise it makes a bigger difference than you would think it would.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Hello.
Hey, Griffin.
How's it going?
Good. My name's Nick.
Hey.
And I was wondering if you had any tips for just sort of motivating yourself, because there's 1,000 things I want to do, but I kind of have a hard time actually getting myself to do them. So yeah, if you had any tips on self-motivation, that'd be good.
Yeah, I'm a lazy guy. I can't say that. That's wild. Historically, I was a pretty lazy person, and the only reason that we started to take the shows seriously, the only reason why we did the pilot episode at all, is because we thought it would be a joke. We thought it'd be a laugh. We thought it'd be fun to do. And so I wasn't thinking of it as some new discipline or some new shot at a career that I had to take super seriously. And it worked. And every other time that I've tried to force something, it hasn't worked. And so, there's this whole philosophy of knowledge that you meet without chasing it down viciously with purpose sticks with you a lot, a lot better than the stuff that you feel like you need to get right now. And so I would say just do one of them that sounds easy and fun. And if it doesn't work out, then okay, if you were trying that thing out and you learned that it wasn't for you, you didn't waste your time. I spent a bunch of money downloading game development software last year, just buying tools and assets, and I was I'm gonna make a game. And I did that for 4 days, and I was no, I am not. But I did it, and I learned more about how games work, so that's cool. And I tried this thing that I've always been interested in doing, and then decided it wasn't for me, and that's good to get that out of the way. I would say just do one that sounds like a fun thing you could do during a weekend afternoon, and just try it. And it doesn't have to be the thing that you end up sticking with, but maybe it is, and maybe you'll get lucky. But if you don't, you can have a good time anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Love to play your game.
Yeah. Hello.
Hey, Griffin. My name's Logan.
Hey.
I have a somewhat jokey, somewhat serious question.
Cool.
What will you guys do if Yahoo Answers ever shuts down?
Yeah, yeah. If you've never listened to My Brother and Me, I bring Yahoos that our fans find. I used to find them myself, and then I couldn't physically anymore go to that website. And so they agreed to head down into the mine shaft. What would we do if it went away? I mean, we'd find something else to do. Justin and Travis are usually pretty good at coming up with bits that live for a month, and then we never hear from them again. So maybe the show would just become that. Maybe it would just become farm wisdom and riddles.
God.
I don't know. I mean, there's no shortage of places on the internet where people say dumb shit. So I think we'd probably be able to find a new source of goof material. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for giving me that panic. I hope it doesn't go away. Sorry. That's all right. Hi.
Hi. Oh, gosh.
I know, it's everyone.
Every time. My name is Mary, and I have a very serious question.
Cool.
Which one of the new Pokemon starters are you going to choose? Because Sobble is my favorite.
Sobble's good. I mean, the strategist in me says Char Bunny, but
Score Bunny.
What is it?
Score Bunny.
Shit, I thought I could impress you.
I'm sorry, I'm 20.
I was gonna say the green one.
I'm 20, and Pokemon's the only thing I think about.
Yeah. God, I miss those days. Yeah, I don't know. I usually go with the fire starter just because there's fewer fire-type Pokemon, I feel like. But I like that grass one. What's it gonna do with that bat? I don't know.
We gotta know.
I guess all that is to say, any of them but Sobble.
Wow.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, but no thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
You want to talk about Yu-Gi-Oh? What's up?
Actually, I'm more of a fan of Hearthstone.
All right. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
But yeah, I have kind of two questions around a similar topic.
Okay,
So-
that's illegal.
Okay. All right. Who reached out first, you guys or Lynn?
Okay.
God, yes.
That's a great question. Because Justin was the one who kind of like first heard from Lynn or got in touch with Lynn.
Okay.
I had never met Lynn until, and I was like pretty unplugged from the musical theater scene. So like, and this was when he was doing In the Heights, which is an incredible fucking show. And I didn't know anything about any musical theater at all. And then we did we had this one day in New York, and this was the worst thing we've ever done tour planning wise. We did a show in New York City, which is probably our biggest market, and we did it in a 99-seat theater. So we put the tickets on sale, and they sold out in 4 seconds, which is not a flex. It's a way of saying that, like, it's a huge market. Of course, there's gonna be 99 fucking people that want to listen to your show. So that one sold out, and we were like, okay, we'll do a second show. And then the venue put the tickets on sale 15 minutes early, and they sold out in 4 seconds. And so we were like, okay, that's unfair. So we'll do a third show. We did 3 shows in one day. It was the worst day. But after one of the shows, we were out meeting folks in the lobby, and Lynn was there, and Justin was like, this is Lin-Manuel Miranda. And I was like, oh, hey, what's up? It's nice to meet you. And no, we chatted because he's an amazing guy, and we surprisingly had a lot to talk about, and then we just kind of had this like friendship that came out of that, where we had him on our show, and he was hysterical, and he wrote us a musical number for our podcast, and I remember things kind of changed for me when we were going to do another show in New York, and he invited us to come to a preview of Hamilton, which was the hottest ticket in town. We sat next to Candice Bergen. Ooh. And I saw Hamilton, and I was like, oh, shit. This is the smartest man that's currently living. Uh-oh. I should have known everything about him and his body of work the whole time. And so then it became very intimidating. But yeah, he's just a great dude. Yeah, I said the #1 New York Times bestseller thing is unbelievable, but like the fact that he'll hang out with us when we come to New York is actually the most unbelievable thing. And it really puts our amount of fame and success in perspective. Because we did a red carpet opening of Jimmy Buffett's Welcome to Margaritaville, who we weirdly enough are also kind of friends with. We were like getting drinks with Lynn because we recorded something in the hotel right before, and we left and then realized like, uh-oh, this is a red carpet premiere for a Broadway show, and Lynn's standing like 5 feet away from us, and it was like a black hole had opened and just the entire borough just kind of like descended like crows on our party. It was the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. So yeah, it's weird, huh?
Yeah, for sure. And then I lost it.
Uh-oh.
Okay, yeah. So a lot of people were really touched by Taz, and now that you've released the comic book, it's expanding even more. Is there plans to extend it even more?
Like the doing more of the balance arc, or taking the balance arc into like different mediums?
Taking it to different mediums, like
Yeah.
specifically animated TV shows.
Okay, calm down. Jesus. We have been in a perpetual state of talking about that for a long time. What you got to understand is like we get a lot of people talking to us, like fans and like production companies, like, hey, let's talk about Bim Bam season 2, and it's like I would love to hear you try to make sense of that because we live in 3 different states and all have children, and like I can no longer go to Huntington for 3 weeks. I can't do it. And more importantly, I won't do it. So you tell me how we make that. And that's very much true for, a bigger Taz project. And like I said, we budget our time, other than the core stuff that we're doing, like super fiercely. So if we decided to do like a Taz TV show, a Taz animated show, which I'd love to do, I think it'd be incredible, but that would be it. Like that would be the only, we could maybe keep doing the podcast alongside it, but like I'm not going to do that on top of a billion other things and bury myself in the hole because I love hanging out with my 2-year-old, and I can't do that as much if I'm doing all this other stuff. So yeah, it's tough. It's like to answer your question, and I hope it's not in like a false tantalizing way, but like, yeah, we're talking about it, and I would love to find a thing that makes sense. I genuinely would. I would love to make one of those. I'd love to make a Taz game of some sort, but it has to make sense, and by virtue of the fact that we are, this family-owned operation who does a ton of different shit, like because of that, like it's harder for us to do big stuff than the average bear. So yeah, that's the answer to that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Hey.
Hey, I'm just going to bask in your attention for one moment. And also, I feel the need to introduce myself by name because literally...
Yeah, do it.
Hi, I'm Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Thank you. Fuck, marry, kill. In that case, wed, bed, behead.
No, are you serious?
Okay.
I'm not going to do this.
Are you sure?
Yeah, do you have a backup question? I'm not going to do that game. I'm married to somebody already. I also don't want to murder.
Well, it was going to be Taco, Magnus, and Merle.
Okay. Yeah, you mean the parts that my family members played in the show we did together?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you starting to figure out that this was never going to happen?
I had to go for it.
I know, yeah, you got to take the big swings. That's what the whole point of this whole speech was. I almost called it a sermon. What?
How did you spend your day in Tallahassee? Did you guys like fly in and immediately just like hang in a hotel, come here, or did you like wander around? And...
It's a great question.
Because I have been thinking about that a lot.
Yeah. I've done nothing. I got in at like noon and I woke up at 4:30 this morning, so I napped for 2 hours. Oof. And then this isn't a joke. I've edited 2 podcasts today since I've been in Tallahassee. I was editing Backstage, an episode of Wonderful that's coming out next week because I'm about to go on a boat for 2 weeks. And the big wheel keeps on turning. So that is how I spent my day in Tallahassee. It's a beautiful city from what I've seen. Don't take it personally. I never see anywhere. We spent 3 days in New Orleans and like got to walk around there. That was the first time that like we have done that in all the years we've been touring. Most of the time it's like we see the hotel. I've been to Seattle 6 different times, and I can tell you where the hotel is and where the convention center is, and nothing else. So yeah, nothing. Sorry.
No worries. Thank you for coming, man.
Thank you. Hello.
Hey, I'm Michael. I just wanted to thank you first off for like bringing so much joy, just you and your whole family, for like me through so much hard times. I'm sure many other people. So, but then my actual question was, how do you find the time to like feel kind of the full moments and feel mindful when all these accomplishments and crazy just events in your life are happening within like the span of like a decade and some years?
I mean, some of them in the span of like 2017 was a fucking crazy year for me. I was a 30 Under 30, and we got hired on to do this, graphic novel, and our, the finale of Taz Balance came out and got like 1 million downloads in a single, like a bunch of stuff happened. I think that's when the Star Wars thing happened, like all of this wild stuff happened. I'll be perfectly honest, one of the terrible side effects of keeping yourself as busy as I was keeping myself is that I wasn't mindful of those things. I wasn't necessarily celebrating the positive response to the work that I was doing. I was enough to keep myself invested in doing it, which is important, but I thought the 30 Under 30 thing was like a cosmic joke that was going to get pulled out from under me at any minute, and then it didn't, and I was like, oh, wow, cool. And then I made a joke about it on the very next podcast and continue to this day. I don't think I did an especially good job of really appreciating the good things that were happening, which is, it only reinforces the kind of bad habits of work that I was getting into at the time. Where I was doing all this work and then being like, well, for what? And it's like, because it's awesome, and because of the incredible audience that you have, and all of these remarkable blessings that were being bestowed upon you. That's why you're doing it. I now realize how important that stuff is, and I hope I am getting better at being mindful of just life in general. Things really have changed since I left Polygon, and have tried to keep my life more in my own grasp. And so, yeah, it's gotten better since then. But back then, I don't know. I didn't do a good job of it. I guess ask another podcaster. I'm sorry, I keep kicking the can down the hallway. That's the turn of phrase for what that means. So, yeah. So sorry, I don't have more on that.
No, that works.
Yeah,
Totally.
thanks.
Thank you for coming.
Hi.
Hi there.
How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Killer. Yeah, great.
All right. So you've mentioned a couple of times now how special Taz has been for a lot of people, myself included. And I think one of the things that makes it special for a lot of us is the representation of LGBTQ characters that you include in your show.
Yeah.
And yeah.
You can dab it.
I'm gay!
All right.
What do you want from me?
All right. Let's calm down.
Sorry.
It's okay.
So obviously you're aware of the LGBTQ following you have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
How would you say that knowledge has sort of influenced the characters and the storylines that you write now for Taz? It is tough to say. Our shows developed a big LGBTQ following, and a lot of it I actually think came from Maximum Fun, which is an incredibly inclusive network and was doing incredible work at building that inclusivity before we joined it. It was a lot of the LGBTQ community who helped us correct the shitty things that we would say on Mabim Bam a lot of the time, because a lot of it was at their expense. Because we were, I'm not going to apologize for it. It was shitty, but we lived a fairly insular life in a small town in West Virginia, and all of a sudden we're speaking to this much larger audience, and we're speaking without much kindness or thought into it. And so we had a large LGBTQ following, and when we started to do the Adventure Zone, and started to dabble in storytelling, started to dabble in narrative, we were ill prepared, I think, for what that was going to mean to people. I had never written a story before in my life. I had no idea, I did know, right, because I have read stories and seen movies and shit, so I knew how stories could resonate with people and what you want out of them, but we weren't being especially mindful about that when we started doing the show, and then we realized, largely because there was an enormous demand from our audience that they wanted that representation, and thinking about it, we were like, yeah, that's an easy call, because more diverse characters leads to better stories and more diverse stories, and you have to be extra mindful because you don't want to fuck it up, and we definitely fell into bad tropes as we went through and tried to correct those too, and yeah, it never was I I used to get kind of uncomfortable when people would like bring this up, not for any shitty reason, but just because like it seemed so obvious. Like why wouldn't you do this? And I guess you can chalk it up to a lot of people just not even thinking that it's something that's important. But once you do know it's important, like why resist it? I genuinely, this is not me being trying to be like a fake ally or anything like that. I genuinely don't understand the alternative mindset. And so it's something that we keep in mind, not just for Adventure Zone, but hopefully for all the shows that we do.
Thank you. You're
Answered
doing
it.
amazing. Sir.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Hello.
Hi, Griffin.
Hi.
I'm Jaden. I just wanted to ask about if you had any advice for people who can't really find what they like.
In terms of career, in terms of like things that you want to do artistically or creatively?
So going back to the topic of your lecture, you said find something that you like and make that your thing.
Sure. You want to hash this out right now? Yeah, I mean, really take a look. You like things, yes?
Yes.
See, you're good. So, I mean, for me, a lot of the stuff I talked about during the speech is stuff that happened when I was where you are now, like in freshman, sophomore year of college, knowing I didn't want to be a broadcast journalist major, but doing it anyway, and like the whole time being like, oh shit, eventually I'm gonna have to do something for money to live, and not knowing what that thing was going to be. And then I owe so much to Justin and the work that he did to get a foothold in the games industry, because that set everything else up, because I watched him do that and I was like, I love games and I actually could do it. And losing that inhibition, losing that doubt that it was something I could do, made me think about this thing that I loved and did all the time in this new light of something that I could actually do. And it didn't feel pie in the sky. It didn't feel like I want to be the next big movie star. But I don't know, if Justin hadn't like done that work, I definitely wouldn't have considered that as a job, and I don't know where I'd be today. I don't know what I'd be doing. So I'm not saying that you're suffering from a lack of imagination. I'm saying that like this is a primo age to have this exact like inflection point of not knowing which of your interests that you have been developing and learning about over the last 20 some odd years or whatever, and which ones can be something that you actually want to do 40 hours a week for the next 40 years or whatever. So I mean, I don't know what to tell you other than like we'd have to list out every one of your interests, and that would probably take up the rest of our time. But yeah, I would just say like be patient with yourself and really just try to think about, even if it seems wildly unrealistic, like what you would like to do every day, because that's ultimately what a job is. Which I hope that didn't come off as condescending, genuinely.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.